everyone. I am so excited to speak to you today about the 5 secrets to social success. So, I work for a company called Meet Edgar, and we are a social media automation tool. And the really awesome thing about working for this company, being an outreach lead, is that I get to really get in and talk to all of our members about setting themselves up to be social media experts in any field. So, we're going to talk a lot about the steps that are simple to achieve for you, but we all know that simple doesn't always mean easy. So, as we're going throughout these, think though how you can adapt these to your own social media strategy and make sure that social media isn't just falling to the wayside and becoming something that you do when you just have time. Because truly, social media is one of the best places for you to reach your followers directly. There is no gatekeeper to the content you're putting out there or the story that you're telling about your brand. Social media is amazing for branding online because when it comes down to it, you're essentially telling the story about how you want people to feel about the product or service you have, how you want your community to act, and what you want them to do with your product or service is completely in your control. So, oftentimes, when people get frustrated with social media, I like to remind people that if you don't know what to post, you're thinking about it too hard sometimes because social media is just having a conversation with your followers. Remember, your followers are following you for a reason. They want to know about you, they want to know about your expertise, and they want to feel like there's a human behind the content that they're consuming. Now, when I say there's a human behind the content that they're consuming, this goes back to the fact we want to keep social in social media. We want to make sure that people are really excited to talk to other people online and make sure that you're creating a community who feels free to do that. So, the counterintuitive fact with all of this is I'm going to talk about these systems for social success. And I work for a social media automation tool. And sometimes when you hear the word systems and when you hear the word automation, you're going to tune out a little bit and say, Megan, if I'm systemizing my social media and if I am going in there and I am making all of these different content items in an automation that is just going to send them out, that makes me seem less human now, doesn't it? And I'm going to tell you that is actually the counterintuitive fact about social media marketing. Because the more systemized that you can make it, and the easier that you can make it on yourself for that content to be distributed out to each network, the more human you're going to seem because you show up consistently with social media posts that are reaching your followers because you've had intention behind them. So you want to make sure that you're thinking about these systems in social media in a way that it makes your followers feel like every single status update was written just for them. So when you sit down and you start to implement these steps that I'm going to share with you, always remember the golden rule is sitting down and feeling like you're talking to one person. Conversational copywriting is the key to social media. We learn so much in school that you have to do things like write really perfectly with these really eloquent words and use proper everything. But on social media, sometimes that can actually be your worst enemy. You want to make it feel like you're texting a friend or you're just reaching out in an email to one of your family members. That is why most people are on social media, to connect with friends and family. So you want your copy and you want the story you're telling to feel to your followers like they're seeing content from their friends. So as we're talking about these systems, you want to make sure you're really thinking about the ways that you can adapt this to your brand's voice. So sitting down and thinking about the feelings that you want to give your followers when they read your content. Everyone's brand is going to have a different answer to that. So don't think there's just one right answer. For example, here at Meet Edgar, we like to come across as a very inspirational brand, sometimes a bit cheeky and jokey and sarcastic, but always positioning ourselves as the go-to brand for social media knowledge and inspiration in your niche. What is that for your brand? Think about that and really make sure as you're writing every single status update you're sending out to your followers that it really shows your brand voice and consistency so that when they see one status update from you and then they see the next one, they can tell it's your voice. They recognize you right away and they're excited to see that content in your feed. So let's dive right in to these steps. So step number one is to categorize your social media. This is super simple. And as well as I was saying before, it's going to be different for everyone when you're developing your categories. So these categories on the screen here are just some general categories that we know work well for telling a story on social media. But you want to make sure the way you're thinking about categories are there buckets of posts, so different types of posts that you're going to rotate throughout the day and throughout the week. This does a few things. First, it really makes sure that your social media feed doesn't become a place where you just start sounding like a used car salesman and you're just shouting promotions at people all the time. No offense to used car salesmen, but that's not how I want to spend my time when I'm just relaxing on social media. I don't want to be sold to. So if you're not rotating through different categories, it's likely that you're going to get the wrong ratio of posts and your feed might become a place where people are like, not this brand again. They're just trying to sell something to me. If you haven't laid the groundwork of building a relationship, having rapport with your followers, and really making sure you're educating and entertaining people with valuable posts, your sales posts are not going to hit well. Another way of looking at this is if you do the groundwork of really building a relationship with your followers through your social media posts, then your sales posts that go out can be shorter. They can be sweeter. You don't have to spend as long on the pitch because you've done the groundwork of building that relationship. It goes back to this term that you've probably heard a lot in social media is know, like, and trust. That is the goal, that you want to get people to know you, like you, and trust you. That's kind of overplayed these days, but the backbone of what it's trying to convey is still true. If people don't know who you are, they can't buy from you. People have a ton of different choices in every industry these days. You can purchase from Coke or Pepsi. Everybody's got that competitor that people get to choose from, right? So you need to make sure that they like you more than they like your competitors. And that goes back to the human aspect of it. So these categories will help share your personality and will help share these other tips and tricks that will really humanize your brand. And then trust. People do not hand over money to people they don't trust. So if you're trying to sell something to someone on social media and they don't trust who you are because you haven't laid that relational groundwork, your sales posts are not going to land. I like to think about this a little bit as if you were on a date as well. If you went out on a date, you would not ask the person to marry you right away on the first date. That's not going to go over well, and you're probably not going to get a yes. But if you spend a few dates courting them, getting to know them, talking to them, really letting themselves see who you are, and then you ask them to marry you, it's much more likely they'll say yes. I know it's a weird comparison, but it makes sense when you think about it this way for social media. Asking someone to marry you is the exact same thing as asking someone to buy from you in this example. So you need to make sure you're rotating through these categories. So how-to content works really well for not only showing how to do something with your product or service, but also other things that go on throughout your day. So how-to content can be something like how to have a really productive morning, my morning routine for getting my kids out the door and being on time at work or something like that. This sort of how-to content is excellent because people really are on social media to learn something. They want to be educated. They want to gain some value. And if you can teach someone something and you can get them a result, so if they take action on your how-to tips and they get a positive result from it, it's much more likely in the future that they purchase from your product or service when you sell to them because you've already gotten them a result. So if you can get someone the outcome that they want, let's take, for example, if you know that your followers, your community is made up of people who are really, really busy in the morning and you give them tips how to make their morning more successful, and they're more successful in that way, they're going to trust you because you've given them an outcome that they want. So make sure you're writing down what challenges your followers have throughout the day and how these how-to content and categories can support the challenges that they have. Other really good categories to think about are questions. A lot of time we think, you know what, I want more engagement on my social media, but we look at our feeds and we're not inviting that engagement with questions. Now, these questions don't have to be hard hitting all the time. They can be simple questions that you're putting out there to your followers, and people will be really excited to answer things like, what's your favorite book? Or a really funny icebreaker question, like, if you were a condiment on a hamburger, which one would you be? These questions don't have a lot to do with your brand, but they train people to actually know you want engagement on your posts. A really good one that I like to really recommend to people is saying, how is your day going? Share it in a GIF. People love to show off their GIF game and share GIFs online, and it gets your community to be reminded that you like them to talk to their posts. That way, when a really great question about your brand might come up, people are more likely to stop and engage with it in the future. So create these categories that invite engagement in. Quotes is a really good category because everyone loves to be inspired on social media. It is some of the most shared content, and it doesn't have to be overthought either. You can go out there and Google quotes that have to do with anything in your industry, copy and paste them onto a graphic in Canva, and upload them onto social media or into a social media automation tool like MeetEdgar to go out. Quotes are really excellent at what we call word of mouth marketing on social media, because so often if we get a great quote that resonates with our followers and they share it to their page, that is essentially sharing your brand's logo to their audience as well. So again, these inspirational quotes might not have anything to do with selling your product or service, but you can bet they do a really good job about raising brand awareness. Now, every piece of content you put on social media has one job to do. That quote does not have to have the job to sell. That quote's job is to get people to share it, to get people to interact with it, and to give your followers a really good feeling when they read it. So don't get stressed out if you feel like all of these categories aren't leading to selling, because remember, the relationship building part is part of the selling. Other really good ones, of course, social media needs to be a place where you are directing people to your website content. So your blog content, your podcast content, anything that it is. You want to remember, you do not build your business on social media. You use social media to direct people to where your business is online. Social media can change its algorithms at any time. Any network can decide just to disappear. And if you're building everything right on social media, you're kind of building your business on rented space. So social media needs to be the hub that you're distributing your content for people to engage with, but you need to remind people where to find you online. So your blog, your website, stuff like that. Behind the scenes content, you need to tell your origin story. When you first meet someone in real life, what's one of the first questions you ask them? It's typically something like, where are you from? This is a really good question to ask about your brand as well. You want to take these real life situations and bring them online for social media. So if you know that people want to have that origin story, you want to make sure that you're giving them that origin story with how you started, why you started your brand, what your brand's values are. This also goes back to the fact that people have a million different choices when it comes to purchasing products online, that if you're not giving people your values, and if your values aren't aligning with them, it's most likely they're not going to purchase from you, because as much as we like to think as humans that we purchase on logic, we purchase on emotions so much more. So if you're sharing your company values and someone aligns with their personal values with that, it's likely you'll create a really good bond. So make sure you're pulling back the curtain on your business and sharing your values and sharing your origin story about why you started. Tips, this is really great for repurposing your content. So getting some really great tips that you're writing in your blogs, sharing in videos, or speaking on your podcasts, and put them as text-only tips. You want to also make sure you're always curating content. So going out there and getting other articles from your industry, not from your direct competitors, but that you might not be an expert in. Remember, to be a really good expert, you can't know everything. And the more niche you can be and the more focused you can be with your content, the better. So sometimes you might know your followers are craving to be educated about a certain subject that you're not an expert in. But if you can go out there and find a blog post from someone else who is an expert in it, it's a great thing to share on social media to show your followers that you care about giving them the best information, no matter where it came from. And it's a great relationship building tactic on social media. You want to make sure that you're sharing other people's content. Seasonal content, you always want to make sure you're sharing stuff that's going to resonate with what's going on in people's lives. Promotional content, you got to go ahead and get your promotions out there. And then list building content, you want to make sure you have things called lead magnets that really get people to sign up for your newsletter. Again, because we want to make sure the most content we're putting out on social media is valuable content, so educational or entertaining. And then if we're collecting people's emails through like a PDF download or something, you can then start to sell in your emails much better than you can on social media. So again, these categories are going to be different for everyone, but go ahead and start categorizing your social media content. Because once you have your categories, we go on to step 2. And this is going to be batching your social media content. So why batching is so important is because it means you only have to create social media status updates 12 times a year. So what batching is it's grouping like tasks together and doing it all at once. This makes sure you're not wasting time multitasking or switching from task to task, because that really wastes a ton of time and you don't get into a really good flow state of working. So with social media, you want to pick one day a month to write all of your social content. This not only makes sure you have a consistent voice on social media so that your brand is recognizable, but it saves you a ton of time. So I want you to go ahead and customize the numbers on here for your brand and what works for your batching strategy. But this is an example of how it would work. If, let's say, you'd like to send out 6 status updates a day, 5 days a week, so every weekday you want to send out 6 status updates, that would be to get a month's worth of fresh content. That's going to be 120 status updates a month. So that means you're going to have to create 120 status updates a month. Holy cow, that sounds like a lot, right? But the trick with categories is if we break this down into categories, that's you only having to create 20 status updates per category per month. And that sounds way more doable, right? So one day a month, you'll sit down, block out your day as content creator day, and write 20 status updates to go in your blog posts, 20 to go in your tips, 20 to go in your behind the scenes content. And again, that means you're only creating status updates 12 times a year if you're doing it once a month, which makes sure you don't feel burnt out about social media. And it makes sure you're really focused on getting a good brand voice that speaks directly into your followers' problems and gives them the solutions that they're seeking. So once you've done your batching, the next step here, number 3, is going to set a distribution schedule. So we have our social media categories. We're creating our content in each of those categories. And next, we need to make sure that content gets out into the world. So the way that these categories play into the distribution set is going to be making sure that 80% of your content is valuable content. 20% can be a little bit more promotional. Now, one of the things about promotional content and selling on social media that I'd really like you to understand is selling can sometimes be helpful content, and we need to look at it that way in our minds. The mindset shift you need to take to make sure you're really good at selling on social is that your social media promotional posts are actually helpful to your community. Because if you've done the work of identifying your community's main pain points, so you've sat down and had conversations with your followers about their biggest challenges in life or their biggest problems or what their hopes and dreams are, then you know how to write content that's going to hit their hearts in a way that your product or service is going to help them achieve those dreams or avoid that pain point. So your promotional content, when you're selling them a product or service that can help get them closer to their desired outcome that they want, those are sales posts because you're selling to them, but they're also helpful posts. So as you're starting to think about how often you're going to distribute your content, and I'm talking about how 80% needs to be helpful and 20% can be promotional, I want you to also keep in mind when you're writing your promotional posts that they are helpful. You need to tell people that a product or service exists in order for them to actually take action and really get the benefits from that product or service. So that's just a really good sales tip to take when you're sitting down and writing your promotional posts during your batching days, is to remember they are also helpful. A good way of actually getting that 20% to land a lot more effectively with your audience is going to be to do things like show social proof. So go out there and tell people who's had success with your product or service in the past. If you don't have a lot of clients or you don't have a lot of people purchasing from you yet, tell your own story about how your product or service has helped you in your life, because people don't want to be the first one to go, right? They don't want to be the first one to try a product or service. They want to see that it's worked before. So your promotional post shouldn't always just be, hey, buy from me. They should really encompass some sort of social proof showing that you can get people the outcome that they want. Other really good things to do in that 20% promotional posting is to make sure that you're really hitting home on the pain that they're going to avoid in the future if they take action now. So why this is important is because when it comes down to actually purchasing from someone, whether it's on social media or whether it's in the real world, us as humans, we need two things. We need a sense of urgency and we need scarcity. For some reasons, our brains really don't like making decisions. So if you can help people make a decision to purchase from you, or on the flip side, if you can help people decide they don't need your product or service, that's a really valuable promotional post. So think about the language you can use. Think about the things you can add into your promotional posts to make sure that they are coming across in a way that's helping people opt in to purchasing from you, or saying, nope, you know what, I don't need this product or service. Either way, you've done your job, because you don't want someone to purchase from you if they don't need your product or service. So think about the fact, if someone does not purchase from you today, what is their life going to be like 6 months from now? How much more stress are they going to have? For example, for a social media automation tool like us, we could play out the scenario that you're still going to be going out there babysitting your social media, feeling like you have no time for it. Whereas if you bought our product and you actually used the Meet Edgar software, you would have a systemized approach and you would feel like social media was a thing that you enjoyed and was manageable. So what is that for your business? Play it out 6 months from now, the feelings that people are going to have if they don't purchase, and try to really get that into your promotional posts. So as you're distributing your content, 80% of it is going to be that valuable category. So how-to content, really helpful tips, inspirational, funny posts, memes, stuff like that. 20% is going to be a little more promotional, where you're leading people to have a sense of urgency to purchase from you, whether it's offering a social media specific discount code, or whether it's getting out there and saying that something is not going to be available. Those things are a sense of urgency, but also remember, you can create that with this sense of, if you don't do this right now, in 6 months from now, you're going to not have the outcome of the life you want. So 80% of your content, valuable content, 20% promotional. This breaks down, if you're sharing 4 posts a day, make sure 3 of them come from valuable categories. 1 of them can be a little more promotional. That's a good way of thinking about it. This also works really well because there's this thing that's called touch points with a brand. And every time someone sees your brand name, that's a touch point, whatever it is. And it's truly said that it takes about 7 to 14 touch points for people to remember and be loyal to a brand. So if every single touch point that you're putting out there with your followers is a sales post, it's not going to give them the feeling that they trust you as much as if those 7 to 10 touch points of just seeing your brand and getting the feelings that you want people to get from it are really valuable content. So remember, this comes down to the fact that you see everything you post on social media, but your followers do not. So make sure that you're getting the majority of valuable content out there. And a really good kind of rule of thumb or a trick with this is, if you have a good promotional post coming up, the post you post right before that, make sure that post is an engagement-oriented post, so that you're asking a question or putting something funny that people are going to like, or doing that GIF idea that I had of asking a question for people to share their GIF. The reason you want this to happen is because how the algorithm works on social media is, if they're seeing people are liking a post, commenting on a post, they're going to be more likely to get the message that, hey, people within this community like seeing content from this page. Let's go ahead and open their content up to more of their followers. So if you get a lot of engagement on one post, and then your very next post is a promotional one, the algorithm's going to remember that people like seeing content from you in their feeds, and they're going to put that in more of your followers' followers' feeds. Remember, the algorithms are existing because they want to give people content that really excites them. So if you're not getting a lot of engagement, work on your engagement first before you start promoting, and your promotional posts will get a lot better of a reach. All right, so next, you want to make sure you always have what we call an evergreen strategy. And that is, you want to make sure you're writing things once and promoting them multiple times. You're working smarter, not harder on social media. So evergreen makes sure that you're sharing things that are really going to get across no matter what time of year it is, it's going to resonate with people. So it's not something that you're putting a specific date or a specific time of year, because this really goes back to the fact, again, that you see everything you post, but your followers do not. And you want to make sure that you remember you're always gaining new followers. So if you're writing really quality content, you want to share it multiple times. This is a really hard thing for a lot of people to get their head around sometimes, but I promise you, if you've never tried this strategy before, you're not going to get people complaining that you're posting the same thing too much. Most people aren't going to see every single status update. And if they do, remind yourself, if you're watching a commercial on TV and if you see it twice, you're not getting mad about it if it's a good commercial. That's why oftentimes on TV, commercials are made to be funny or entertaining, because if you see it a couple times and it's a quality commercial, you're not mad. Same with your social media status updates. If you're sharing a blog post a couple of times, but it's a really quality status update, people are not going to be mad about it. And you want to use social media to continue to drive traffic to your older posts. So if you do social media in an evergreen fashion, your followers are going to be able to see that content, that blog post, multiple times throughout the year. The reason that this is important is because not all of your followers are ready to buy right away. Sometimes it takes a little bit more nurturing to move people through what we call a marketing funnel. So what a marketing funnel is at the top comes your brand awareness phase. You're getting people aware that your product or service exists. Then you're moving people down the funnel to get them to consider purchasing from you. So they're weighing their options, whether your product or service is going to solve their pain point, whether they should purchase from someone else or not. Then you're moving people down to the decision phase, whether they're actually going to buy or not. And sometimes each piece of content can help move people through this. But let's say you put a sales piece of content out there and it hits someone when they were in the brand awareness phase and they're not ready to buy from you yet. But if you reshared that piece of content a couple of months later, perhaps they're in a better space where they feel like they can afford to purchase, or their pain point has grown strong enough that they need your product or service to help solve it. That's going to really lead them to be able to take action on that post. And if you hadn't reshared it, they might not have taken action on it. So make sure you're really doing that. And if you're afraid to share the exact same thing, you can make variations on your content. So change the wording, because we never know what's going to resonate with someone. So make sure you're varying the language you're using and A/B testing what words are compelling people to click through on your links or to like your posts, to use that and feed it back into your other social updates. So we're always looking at social media in an experimental mindset. You always want to make sure that you're sharing on a schedule, so rotating through your categories. You also, again, want to make sure that each piece of content has one job to do. If you're giving a piece of content multiple calls to action, then it's not going to get your followers to take action on it. Because again, we're on social media most of the time to relax and just kind of tune out and really connect with our friends and family. So if you're asking your followers to decide what to do on that post because it's not super clear whether you want them to click through and read your blog or whether you want them to answer a question right there, they're not going to take action on it. So one content item and one call to action. You also really want to make sure that you're doing things like asking questions related to the content you're putting out there. So if you've written a blog post, let's say, for example, if me, Edgar, wrote a blog post about batching your social media, we could go out there and put a question out there like, hey, who here practices a batching strategy for their social media status updates? We're hoping we'll get a lot of people commenting in the comments about if they use that strategy or not. For the people in the comments who comment that they don't know what batching is or that they don't do it yet or they need help with this, we're going to then take that blog post link and answer them in the comments. Again, we could just share that blog post on social media, and we will, But this strategy is really great at relationship building because people feel like you're being helpful directly to them and you're speaking one-on-one and not just broadcasting this content everywhere. So look at the content you have and look for ways that you can actually put questions related to that content out there and then answer people in the comment section. So you get more engagement on that post and people feel like there's a one-on-one connection to you. And if you're batching your status updates and distributing them in a systemized way, you'll have a lot more time to do this live engagement on social media. So that's why those first few steps are so important, so that you can spend the time engaging with people and doing things like polls in your stories, asking people questions in your stories and directly answering them, or doing this question idea here so people are reminded that you want them to talk to you on social media. All right, so step number 4 is upcycling your content. So what upcycling your content is taking one piece of content and making multiple status updates out of it. We don't want you to reinvent the wheel every time. So how this works is, let's say you're taking one blog post and you're making it into multiple status updates. You don't just have to share the link every time. You can do really creative things like write and research a really good blog post. And then could you take that and turn it into a podcast? It doesn't have to be hard. You can simply just read the blog post into a podcast format. Some people, like myself, actually love listening to podcasts way more than I love reading. So if you're giving me the opportunity to consume your content in the medium that I like to consume it best, I'm going to be more likely to actually take action and listen to it. Vice versa. Some people might not like listening to a podcast, but they might like reading a blog post. So you can get that one piece of content in multiple forms to make sure you're giving people the opportunity to consume the content in the medium that they want. Another idea for this is you could take that same blog post that you researched and you could actually go ahead and put some of the copy in there into your newsletter. This is another piece of content because you know not everyone is going to actually read your blog, but you have really valuable tips in there that you already researched and wrote. So why wouldn't you just copy and paste those ideas into your newsletter and send that out to your followers? You're not having to reinvent the wheel with every content item you're putting out there. And a lot of people get afraid that, like, what if someone actually read the blog post and then I'm copy and pasting it into my newsletter? Remind yourself, you want to be seen as an expert in your field. To be seen as an expert, you have to repeat yourself sometimes. It goes back to this idea that if you had to go to the doctor, let's say, to get a surgery, would you choose the doctor who's done 100 different surgeries? Or would you choose the doctor who's done the same surgery 100 times? You'd probably want that doctor who's done the same surgery 100 times because he's more of an expert. So I talk about like upcycling social media all of the time because that's something that me, Edgar, would like to be seen as an expert in. And it's okay if I repeat myself because when people hear the term upcycling out there, they're going to associate it with me, Edgar's strategy of posting on social media. So you want to get these hooks that are really good for showcasing you as an expert and make sure that you're using them in every piece of content you're putting out there. Next, you could take that same blog post. So we're still looking at that same pillar piece of content, and you could go ahead and turn that into a graphic, what's known as a quotable on social media. So just copy and pasting some pull quotes, putting them on a background in, say, a program like Canva, which is a graphic design program, because again, social media has to be a really visual place. So sometimes if you're just putting links or if you're just putting text, it's not going to grab people's eyes. Some people are really attractive to colors and really attracted to graphics. So if you're not putting that kind of content out there, you might not be really grabbing those people. But you're not doing more work really here. You're just using what you've already researched and written in a quality way and upcycling it into a graphic. Next, you could take that same blog post and you can make a PDF from it. Remember, you want to make sure that you're always using social media to build up your traffic to your website and to build up your email list, because those are two things you own. You own your website and you own your email list. You do not own social media. So you want to take your followers who are on social media and bring them into your email list. But people are not just going to give you their emails. You have to give them something of value in exchange. What that value in exchange could be is a download, let's say, that really teaches people something like a checklist or something that you know your followers are working on, and they can download that in exchange for their email. So think about a lead magnet that you can actually create for your followers out of one of your blog posts. A good way of doing this is looking at the blog posts and thinking to yourself, what is the next step that my followers would take? So if I wrote a blog post, let's say, about upcycling your content, the concept we're talking about here, my PDF download could be a checklist for how to upcycle one blog post. Because after someone consumed my blog post about upcycling, I want to give them a resource where they can just check off and make this process even easier. So relate the lead magnets you have back to this pillar piece of content here. Another idea is you could go ahead and do a 2-minute video just explaining some of the takeaways from this blog post. We all know video is incredibly popular online these days, and it's something the algorithms are always giving value and preference to in people's feeds. So you want to make sure that you're taking advantage of that so your post can get the biggest reach possible. And you don't have to get really nervous about creating a new video because you already know the subject matter you're talking about because it's this blog post that you went ahead and wrote. So once you have all of that, the last step in social media success is going to be engaging with your followers. So remember, all of this content that we're creating on social media gets a lot stronger if people are actually consuming it and actually talking about it with you. You want to make sure that you're scheduling and batching your status updates so you have time to engage with your followers. This becomes known as a concept that you don't want to post and ghost. If your followers learn that you're just posting something just to get your brand name out there and not to actually help them and talk with them, they're not going to respond to you and you're not going to get the really big bump in engagement that your social posts deserve. So make sure you leave at the end of your day, let's say 10 minutes to check in on all of the status updates that you wrote for that day and go ahead and engage with them. Now, mind you, listen to what I said there. Pick a time of day to do this. Don't feel like you have to log into social media every 5 minutes to make sure you're responding to a comment. It's okay if you respond a few hours later. And you want to batch your engagement in the same way that you're batching your social media status updates when you're creating them. Because we don't want social media to become something that's pulling you away from your other tasks in your business. We want social media to be something where you're doing it in a way that's really systemized. So at the end of your day or in the middle of your day, whenever you feel like you want a social media break anyway, why not use that social media break to engage with your followers rather than just mindlessly scrolling through? So leave 10, 15 minutes to go in and engage with people who commented on your posts that way. If you're not getting a lot of engagement and people aren't really commenting, use that batching time, that engagement time, to go out and DM some of your followers. Start talking to them and asking them questions. Go into Facebook groups or LinkedIn groups where you know your ideal followers already hang out and start offering value in those groups. This is going to be a great way for you to be seen in other areas on social media. So make sure, even if you feel like you're not engaging with the posts that you're putting out there quite yet, if you're still building up your followers this way, go out to other areas, comment on other people in your industry's photos, build relationships online, and really collaborate to make sure that people are seeing you as a really helpful person on social media. And that online karma of going out there and doing good will come back to you by people actually feeling like they'll engage on your posts too. So whatever you do with engagement, just make sure that you're batching it and not having it take over your life. So it all starts with building trust and having a conversation with your followers. We started talking about this in a way that we're saying these steps are pretty simple, and I hope you feel that same way as we were going throughout this presentation. You can tell it's not rocket science. It just takes you having a systemized approach so that social media doesn't just get lost in your task list as something you get around to when you have time, because people are not going to pay attention to posts that aren't showing up consistently, that aren't showing up with really thought out intent behind them. And they're not going to go ahead and trust you if they're not seeing that content from you on a regular basis. So that's why systemizing your social media makes it a lot more effective. So make sure you start batching your content, you start engaging and start really taking advantage of what these platforms do, which is bring your brand and your brand story in the way that you want to tell it right to the people who need your content. So What is your social media mindset? You really need to make sure you tell people how you can help them. That's really what marketing is when it comes down to it. It is simply telling people how your product and service can help them in their lives, and then they get to opt in to say yes or no if they need that product or service. So don't overcomplicate social media, but have systems behind it to really make sure that your content will shine. It was really fun talking to you guys today about social media success. It is one of my favorite things to speak about. And I really hope that you take some of these tips into your social media marketing so social becomes a fun thing in your business.